So, a question I've been seeing a lot lately is, who should I use? I've got all these phantoms. I don't know which ones to really use. Which ones work well together? Which ones do what role? Just not quite sure. Well, let me see if I can help you out. Hey y'all, JTOWN here. Now, before I get started, I just want to let you all know about some other content creators that you need to follow for all the information related to the game. The community isn't as large as it is in other games you may have come from, so there's a few people who've been really putting together a lot of good info and more that are starting up. So I'm going to need you to go look at the Higher Standard on YouTube. I'm going to need you to go check out MBW on Twitch, Dan Heilman on YouTube, and obviously you probably know Hell Hades. He's got a few videos coming out that are really good as well. So on YouTube, if you look, there is some good information about different aspects of the game. As always, feel free to hit us in Discord, we'll answer any questions you've got. All right, let's jump into it. So team composition, why it matters, how do I set it up, what phantoms to use? Well, the first thing is to identify what roles do you need, what roles are there to fill. And I like to break this down into 4 main roles. You've got your Initiator, you've got your Control or Secondary DPS, you got your main AoE DPS, and then you got your Finisher. Now, there are a little bit of leeway with those Secondary DPS and Control and your Finisher, depending on the overall goal of your team comp. The primary team composition is going to be for the one-turn kill, right? That's why we have a good Initiator. You've got a Controller or Setup or AoE defense down. You've got your AoE nuker who's going to just try to kill everything, and then you've got your Finisher, who, if there's like a main central boss monster in that fight, you really want them to single target, just knock them out. So that's the goal. Once you get to endgame and you're able to get your gear substats just right, your runes just right, get that high level of power, you're going for that one-turn kill if you possibly can, especially on open world content. Maybe a little more difficult in the Incubus and Hell dungeons, but out in the open world as you're questing, you should definitely be hitting that one-round kill. If you do it right, your enemies will never get a turn. All right, so looking at my team here, just as an example, right? This is the what's been the meta up until the new release. There's going to be a little bit change in the meta, but my Initiator is the Astral Clock, right? Because the first move he uses on auto increases the attack bar of all my other phantoms, right, by 35 to 40%, depending on how much you've skilled them up. That's a huge boost. So he's the Initiator. He's the fastest phantom in the game. You can pump him out till he goes first. Brings all your other phantoms up so they can go before the rest of the team as well, before your enemies. My second, my Control / DPS / AoE defense down is Puppeteer. Now, Puppeteer is arguably the most important phantom in the game you could pull because she's the only current AoE defense down in the game. She also can resurrect, and she does a decent amount of damage to kind of soften the enemies up for you, but her primary role is an AoE defense down. Allows your other phantoms to do a lot more damage. So she's who I've got as that secondary, flex spot. Third, obviously, he's going to be my Bloody Overlord. Bloody Overlord is a powerhouse. He's god tier in this game because his AoE multipliers are insane. Nobody AoEs like Bloody Overlord. So he's that AoE nuker. He's going to drop all the lower mobs and do a significant amount of damage to a lot of the boss mobs too. You may find that he can kill everything on his own up until you get to those end game higher difficulties. And then in my Finisher spot, I've got the current #1 finisher, which is Merlin. Merlin, his attack is like a barrage. If there's only one target, all 12 hits of the barrage will go onto that target, and if they all crit, it's lights out. Also, those attacks have the ability to absorb attack bar, so they can do damage, and if they don't kill it, they're going to keep it from getting that next turn, which is really, really nice. Now, if there's other enemies spread out, he's still going to do that damage spread across those other enemies, and he can still, really do some sick damage, but he's the most potent when all those hits can go onto one target. All right, now let's talk about options we have for each of those different roles. First up is the Initiator. This one is really easy. There are 2 main options, but based on the way the questing rewards are, they give you the #1 Initiator in the game very early in the game. You can get him in the first 10 to 15 minutes of playing, and that is Astral Clock. Astral Clock is phenomenal. All right, let's just go and take a look at his skills real quick. So, Astral Clock, the A3 here, is self-healing. It increases the attack bar of the rest of the team by 25% at base and grants them control immunity, which means they can't be slept or frozen, anything like that. But if you max it out, it increases their attack bar by 40%. And if those phantoms already have some speed on them, your entire team's gonna go before the enemy team. It's insane. That is always the ability he will use first on auto, which is what makes him great. Now on manual, you can choose whatever skill to use, but that is just a great skill right there. Now the secondary and before the rework of clock was the primary initiator, really the only go-to option, and that was Sea Conqueror. Sea Conqueror is near and dear to Higher Standard's heart, always will be. But let's look at her skills and tell you why. She had this skill right here called Fire Combo. Okay? It attacks an enemy 4 times in a row, deals physical damage based on her HP somewhat. It's a nice potent hit. But then it had absorb the enemy's attack bars by 25%, right? But it doesn't go higher than 25%. So while she's very fast, not quite as fast as Clock, her initiation was removing the attack bar off your enemies, whereas Clock's initiation was increasing your own Phantom's attack bar by 40%. So while they're both really good options, and Sea Conqueror is still top tier, she's just outclassed by Clock. There's nothing that she does that Clock can't do better. So that's why she's not currently the meta choice for that, because you're definitely going to have a Clock. If that Clock was not a guaranteed drop early in the quest line, you could go with either one you've gotten, and you wouldn't go wrong. All right, now let's talk about our secondary DPS / control / defense down choice. The obvious number one top tier god tier Phantom that you could have is Puppeteer, as we just said. All right, because of her skills. Her A2, called Puppet Key, which is the first skill she uses on auto every time, attacks all the enemies, dealing a decent amount of damage, right? And it decreases their defense by 30% for 2 turns, right? 100% chance. It's not optional. It's not based on accuracy. It just does. It places it, okay? That is huge because then it makes all the Phantoms and your player character, if they go after that, to deal much more damage. It's huge, especially if the enemies you're fighting are a good deal above you in level. So that's your number one for that control / secondary DPS flex spot. Let's talk about other good options. What else could you use there? Well, Haley is kind of my second choice. Haley is just crazy awesome because she will use her AoE first turn. Spirit of the Sea. She attacks all enemies and absorbs the attack bar with 25%. So she is further keeping your enemies in check from going, in addition to dealing a decent amount of little damage, softening the enemies up. So she's a great second choice. Another choice that was really, really popular, especially up until the update, was Lord of Shadows. Lord of Shadows does some really good damage in his own right because it's based on his HP. With his skill, Assault of Shadows, he always uses this first, right? He does 4 times damage based on his match HP, and there's a built-in chance to stun. So that's really nice. So that can definitely soften those enemies up for your AoE nuker to really drop some things. Another choice is Prometheus, right? Prometheus. He will always use Lava Burst first. And that summons a fire jet to deal 220% magic damage, right? And setting them on fire. The setting them on fire doesn't do enough damage to be worth it, but he can do a considerable amount of damage and really soften them up for your actual AoE nuker, right? King of Margarod, he got reworked long before the update, and I actually like him a lot. The skill that he always uses first, and we're talking about the first skills because most of your fighting you're going to do is on auto, unless you have very specific team comps you need to fight with. Currently, there's not an AI system in place for you to choose which skill they use first. There is a definite set which one they're going to do. It's Wave Crash, right? He does an AoE attack in all the enemies 4 times, right? With a chance to freeze them. That's awesome. It happens a good amount. He also has a passive, right? Sea Protection. So whenever somebody on your team, including him, is being damaged, he has a chance to give a mitigation of 50% and a free turn to those other players. So the amount of value you're getting of him just standing there, not only doing his pretty decent AoE with chance to freeze, is crazy. It's a crazy amount of control and chance of bonus terms all in one Phantom, who's not even your main DPS. All right, if you're running a actual control team, right, you've based your entire comp on keeping the attack bars down to the enemies, locking them out of taking turns, then Sea Warrior could be that flex spot for you. He's always going to use Astral Spear first, right, because it does damage. And it looks like that doesn't do anything else besides some decent damage, right? But it's his passive, right? His passive is anytime he critically hits an enemy, he's going to reduce their speed by 50%, up to 65 with skill ups for 2 turns. So if you get his crit rate to 65% or higher, you're pretty much always going to have your enemies reduced in speed. Now, it's going to require some accuracy on his part to be able to land that. And it's a little harder to get the high crit rate real early in the game, but he is amazing for keeping things slowed. Now, his damage gets outclassed by most things at the end game, but he is the king of slow. Definitely going to be in your team when you're running the water elemental tower. All right, now we're on to the main event, right? The big dog, the DPS, the AoE nuker. And why AoE nuker? Because you're always going to be fighting more than one enemy. You want to be able to take them all out. You don't want to have to take multiple turns taking one at a time, right? So let's talk about the kings right now, or the king of the AoE nuking, and that's Bloody Overlord, right here. The man himself, sometimes confused for a woman. Let's take a look at the skill that he used first, and I'll explain to you why he's so awesome. All right, so the skill that he's going to use first, right, is actually going to be 2 skills. Because Blood Boil, right, he's going to grant 30% extra attack and full attack bar, and it can be used on himself. So he can self-buff, jack up his damage, and give himself an instant next turn that's only sometimes interruptible if somebody sneaks right in there based on their speed, but it's not very often. So he loses his health, right? You're like, okay, it's kind of like a Dark Knight in a lot of the Final Fantasy games where you deal damage by sacrificing your own health. Kind of, but that'll make him do even more damage, and let me show you. So you can boost that up to 75% extra attack and losing 20% of current HP. And you're like, no, that's a lot. No, you want to lose the 20% HP, right? Because this Blood Lotus skill right here, 150% damage to all enemies. Every 10% of HP that he's lost gives him an extra attempt to deal damage, maximum 4 attempts. Right? The last hit's damage is increased by 20%. You can scale that damage all up to 200%. So if he only takes the damage that he dealt to himself, he's getting 3 hits. If he's taken other damage from maybe super fast enemies or something else occurred, he's getting 4 hits. That's ludicrous. Those numbers are ludicrous. Now, it gets better. Exaltation. Right? When the enemy has a debuff, which could be most commonly the bleed debuff from the Bloodthirsty Axe, it could be the defense down from Puppeteer, it could be a freeze, it could be a slow, right? If the enemy has a negative effect on them, he will deal, at base, 50% extra damage caused by his attacks. Attacks plural. All of the swipes, right? Now, at max skill, you can get to 125%. Are you seeing why Bloody Overlord is the king of AoE nukes? Nobody comes close, right? Those numbers are nuts. Now, with the recent buffs to Hell and Incubus difficulties, you're going to need to have him in a good team comp. You're going to need the AoE defense down from a Puppeteer. You're going to need to have solid runes on him with some good magic attack and crit damage. But this guy's AoEs are nuts. All right, so who are other good options for our AoE DPS slot? Well, I think coming in second place right now is Dracula, right? Dracula was reworked and has come into prominence recently with the update. And let's take a look why. He deals 250% magic damage to all enemies with a chance to stun them, right? So basically it's like Lord of Shadows on crack right there. That can be buffed up to almost 300%. That's without any other things happening. Just 300% multiplier on the skill alone by itself is awesome, right? What other value does he bring, right? Well, if the battle lasts more than one turn, he's going to have a chance to heal himself just existing, right? And if he gets attacked, say the other team goes before him and lays down some AoEs or just attacks him, he's got a chance to put him to sleep. They go night-night. You want to go night-night? And then he has a lifesteal on his A1 if you get to the point where he needs to be using his A1. So Dracula is a solid option in that AoE DPS slot. Like, if you pull him, you go with it. Unless she's getting swapped out for a Bloody Overlord, he's going to be your guy. He's going to be in there. All right. Now, another mention, because she's poised to become the most powerful Phantom in the game based on sheer numbers of damage done, but with a catch. All right. Ankaris, people will jokingly say she needs more speed, but increasing her speed won't help her because she takes 2 turns to deal her damage. You get her most commonly from the big spender, but she can be pulled in epic books. I've seen it and done it multiple times, right? So what makes Ankaris so good? Well, she will use Chivalry, right? And she'll restore her health, and she'll increase her physical attack by 180% 2 turns. You'll see this bubble go around her, right? So she heals herself, she gets ready to do all this damage, and then on her next turn, she casts Wild Blade. Now, Wild Blade is crazy. She's going to go Naruto Ninja on some people. She's going to just zip, 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 zip all around the screen, hitting him 6 times, dealing 80% physical damage each time, increases up to 105%. But remember, she already buffed herself, right, by 180%. If you've got her up to where every single one of those hits are crits, you've got high crit damage on her. Oh, her damage is legendary. You'll see a boss at an endgame level on full health, and she'll unleash that, and you just see his health go 0, deleted. There's a lot of value there, but the way she works doesn't allow that first turn kill that we talked about earlier. So, damage is unmatched, but unless you have a very specific substat rolls, a specific enchantment, and you manually cast it, there's no way to get her to go first turn. Alright, other options you could put in. Goddess Zoe. Everybody knows about Goddess Zoe, right? Goddess Zoe is top tier elite. She was the go-to meta before Bloody Overlord. Now you can swap between one or the other, and they don't play well together. I'll tell you why in just a moment. Why is Zoe so good? Zoe is good because she will always start out with Initial Fire Judgment. 250% magic damage to all the enemies, sets them on fire. Just like with Prometheus, the setting them on fire really doesn't do anything. You're not here for that. But you can get up to 330% on an AoE. That's pretty nice. You're like, okay, but Dracula can do that. Okay, fair. Enchantment Source, right? A passive. At the beginning of the battle, she just makes your entire team, including all your allies if you're playing with other people in the team, just do 10% more damage. If you skill it up, 25%. That's just, you just do more damage now. So that's amazing, right? And she heals you passively. You doesn't have to take a turn to do it. Anytime somebody in your entire allied team takes a turn, 10% HP back. 10% of the lost HP, right? So the more HP you've lost, the healthier the heal is. But it's like, okay, you took a turn, there's a heal for everybody. You took a turn, there's a heal for everybody. It's nuts. The only negative thing about that is if you're running a Bloody Overlord, as soon as he does his self buff, which he loses some HP to get ready to give him more hits, she just heals it right back, and he gets less hits, thus nerfing the amount of damage he does. So putting them both in a team together outdoes any benefit Zoe would increase of his damage, right? She decreases his damage by the healing more than she gives him from the 25% damage buff. So they don't really go well together. Now, here's what she's really famous for, and what people really remember her, is this Phoenix Strike. She's not going to use it first turn on auto. You have to manual it. But she'll use it second turn, and this thing is going to punch stuff in the face, right? It's going to hit you so hard, your mama's going to feel it, all right? Phoenix attack, one enemy, 200% magic damage, extra magic attack based on the enemy's HP. Holy crap. On those big, chonky enemies, this thing is an absolute nuclear weapon, right? So, yeah, she's a great alternative, but she's always going to lead with the Initial Fire Judgment, that AoE. It's a really good AoE, but it's not going to get anywhere close to the likes of Bloody Overlord. Honorable mentions for that spot, right? That DPS spot. We could put at early level, right? If you're a low level team, you have a whole lot of phantoms. You could put in King Argon, right? Zeus is an option, and he's a relatively decent champion, but he's got slow speed, and his real benefit is hitting enemies that already are paralyzed, right? When he has an attack, anytime he attacks them, he can definitely paralyze them. You scale it up 100%, they're going to be paralyzed, right? His induction gives him a chance to do an incredible extra amount of damage to paralyzed enemies. So unless you have somebody else paralyzing the enemy, he really comes to shine when he does the second round of damage versus an already paralyzed enemy. But if our goal is to do the first round kill, that's usually not going to happen, right? So Zeus is good, not great. All right, now for the final category, the final spot or role in your team you're looking for is a finisher, right? The number one finisher, like we said earlier, is going to be Merlin, just because of the skills, the way they work. We talked about that. Some other options for you, right? A low budget early game finisher, if you can pull, is going to be the Demon Catcher right here, just because of the way the style of the hit, right? So her thing she's always going to use first turn is going to be her A2, the Shadow combo. It's going to shoot an enemy 3 times in a row, causing a total of 240 physical damage, right? And that enemy she kills cannot be resurrected, which is cool if you're fighting the enemies that have Ripper or Puppeteer in them, as they can res phantoms back up, and it's annoying as crap, right? She keeps them down. They can't come back. And that damage gets up to 285%. So early game, you probably don't have a Merlin yet, but you've got one of these. She could be a great finisher. Just if you can, with the speed tuning of the runes of your team, try to make her go last for that purpose. Because you don't want her picking off a smaller enemy that your AoE nuker could have already wiped out. Now, a really good single target damage phantom, but can't fit the role of finisher just because of the mechanics of the way she works, is Secret Dancer, right? We all know Secret Dancer. Right, Secret Dancer right here. She, in the old version of the game, was just the queen of, like, she's going to go nuts and drop 1,000 crits on you, right? But she has this thing called cooperation right here, right? Where an ally deals damage, there's a 40% chance, bookable up to 70% chance, she's going to coordinate that attack, right? So if you've got her planning to be your finisher last turn person, she's going to just start going out of turn. She's going to start going off randomly, right? And she's pretty fast, so it's not feasible really to get her into a spot to be that finisher. Now, depending on how you roll your team composition, you could have your whole setup just be around for Ankaris going and finishing everybody off. So you could go with just your Initiator, AoE defense down, another Flex to kind of soften things up or control or prep things, and then Ankaris, right? As opposed to having that AoE nuker and then a finisher, you could just have, you know, that Initiator, Flex, control, and then Ankaris, because especially when the update comes out here soon with some changes to her, she's going to be even far more deadly. We're going to refer to her as Goddess Ankh after the update. All right, so are there any other comps other than the normal one-turn rotation, right, with the Initiator, the Control, Flex, the AoE nuker, and the finisher? Yes, there's a couple. We've got kind of a flexible team for low spend, where it's just kind of getting phantoms that aren't quite as top tier, but have mechanics that work well together to push you through, as well as control comp, right? Let me start out with the control comp, the one that's near and dear to my heart, the Loco team, right? Lockout with your clock out. Variation of the original lockout team. It involves clock as your initiator, just to make sure you always go first, right? And you're going to have Haley, ideally in Headcracker, but Headcracker is not farmable now early. It takes crafting, which later on, so you're probably not going to have those available to you. But she keeps the enemy from going by lowering the attack bar. She can also get turns to go randomly based on her passive, right? And then another member that's going to be the Dracula Eye. because the Dracula Eye is first ability is gonna hit 3 enemies. It's gonna absorb some attack bar. Then you're gonna pair those also with the Sea Warrior, who's going to slow all the enemies on his crit. And with that, you can just keep cycling back around through the control, keeping your enemies' attack bars down while also pulling them down in damage. So that's an option that are all easily obtainable phantoms that you can do from the get-go to really start getting through the content. Now let's talk about some other options for you don't have these top tier in-game phantoms. You don't really know if you have all the roles that we've mentioned. What are some other kind of teams you can do? Well, as we've said, you're always going to get Clock. Clock is given to you. There's no reason you shouldn't be using it as Initiator no matter what. Merlin can be farmable once you've completed the final stage 12 of abode level. You can farm for the fragments. It may take you a hot minute, but he's obtainable by everyone. So in between there, you've got DPS and Flex, right, between your Initiator and your Finisher. Well, what are some good things to pull in there? You could put Lord of Shadows and Prometheus, right? Those are fairly decent, easy to get. You could put King of Margaret and Haley in there, right? A little bit of control and decent damage, right? Just pump their magic attack up. You could roll with a King Argon and a Zeus, right? They play well off each other. One of the best, and Bella Fox was always a huge proponent of this in the day. She would like to use Queen of Chaos and the Duke of Fate. Now, why are Queen of Chaos and Duke of Fate so good together? Well, they both use confusion, right? So she's always going to lead off with Chaos Whip, right? She's going to whip all the enemies 9 times. It's going to do kind of a lower damage, right? But it's going to have a 10% chance of inflicting confusion on them with each attack. So there's definitely a high chance she's going to have them all confused, right? The damage goes up. It's pretty decent, right? It's nothing to laugh at, right? Now, Duke of Fate, you want him to go after her because of this passive right here. You see, when attacking confused enemies, deals 200% additional magic damage. Right, that's a passive. The lead-off ability he's going to use, Summon a Rune Bearer, to deal 240% magical damage to all enemies and 50% chance to absorb their attack bars. Keeping them confused, absorbing their attack bars, and dealing bonus damage based on the confusion is a nice damage and control mechanic if you pair the two together, right? Because they are the king and queen of confusion. So having the Clock, and then your Queen of Chaos, and then your Duke of Fate go, and then your finisher like a Merlin or an Ancaris, or if you're doing well enough, even one of the AoE nukers could be that 4th spot. That's a really good composition to lay down some damage. All right, so that's my thought process. Whenever I'm making a team comp, I'm looking through on a new account, what phantoms do I have? What are my goals? What am I trying to achieve? What do I have to work with? So I hope that helps you make those decisions. Any of the phantoms that I've mentioned in this video are worth using, right? Some better than others. So use this as kind of like a tier list if you'd like. We are working on other tier lists. They may flex and change as the meta evolves, but hopefully this video has helped you guys. And if you have, like I said earlier, if you have any further questions on who you should use, what roles to fill, trying to clear specific content, how to get through it, we'll definitely help you out. Hit us up in the Discord. Come join us in Gallifrey. SG is on the move again. It's growing. It's so good to have everybody on. Hopefully this helps. And as always, see you in game.